The day they bulldozed my great-grandfather's bridge was the day I decided I wasn't going to play nice anymore. It was 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. The lake was still wrapped in fog, the kind that softens the trees and makes sound travel strange and hollow. I was standing on my dock, holding a steaming mug of coffee, when I heard the low growl of diesel engines across the water. At first, I thought it was another construction crew working on the new luxury homes. But then I saw it, the yellow shape of an excavator crawling down the slope toward the old stone bridge. For a second, my brain refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. That bridge had stood there for 100 years, solid limestone arches, hand-cut and placed by my great-grandfather, Samuel Morrison, in 1923. It wasn't just a bridge. It was the heartbeat of this lake, the connection between generations. And now a handful of people who'd moved here 2 years ago had decided it was an eyesore. The machine's bucket arm lifted, gleaming in the pale light, and came down with a crunch that echoed clear across the water. A plume of dust rose into the fog. The sound didn't just hit my ears, it hit something inside my chest. I set down my coffee, pulled out my phone, and hit record. Tuesday, 6:14 a.m., I said, voice shaking. They're tearing down the Morrison Bridge. The HOA didn't even warn me. As another blow cracked through the quiet, I whispered the words that would end up changing everything. They have no idea what they have just started. They built their fancy resort on water my family controls. That was the morning I decided to turn their $4 million lakefront paradise into a muddy parking lot. When the noise finally died, I drove around to the site. Half the bridge was gone, limestone blocks scattered like bones. A man in a neon vest was talking into a walkie-talkie, while a woman in pearls and designer sunglasses looked on from a white SUV. I didn't need an introduction. Everyone around here knew who she was, Linda Prescott, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. 2 years in the neighborhood, and she ran it like a private kingdom. Mrs. Prescott, I said, stepping out of my truck, what gives you the right to destroy my property? She didn't even flinch. Mr. Morrison, this structure violated community safety standards. The board voted for immediate removal. I laughed, a short, ugly sound. That bridge was here before your development existed. Before you existed, Linda tilted her head, that practiced smile never leaving her face. Times change, Mr. Morrison. Progress requires sacrifice. Progress. That word stuck with me all day. My name's Jake Morrison, civil engineer by trade, 4th-generation Texan, and, until that morning, a man who believed in following rules. 3 months earlier, I'd inherited our family's cabin and the surrounding land after my father passed. The cabin sat on the quieter side of Lake Morrison, a patch of woods and shoreline my great-grandfather bought when this whole area was ranch country. The lake, the dam, even parts of the irrigation system, he'd helped design them all. When I moved in, I thought I'd found peace. Mornings on the dock with coffee, evenings fixing up the cabin, weekends fishing with my wife, Sarah. We talked about retiring here someday, keeping the place in the family another 100 years. Then the resort came. And with it, the HOA Whispering Pines sprouted on the far side of the lake like weeds after rain. 50 luxury homes, a clubhouse, and a promise of modern lakeside elegance. The first time I saw the billboard, I felt uneasy. By the time Linda moved in with her spotless BMW and community improvement plans, I knew trouble was coming. 2 weeks after the bridge came down, I received a certified letter. Thick envelope, embossed seal, the kind that smells like intimidation. It began sweetly, "Dear Mr. Morrison, after careful review, the board has determined that the structure known as the Morrison Bridge violates Section 47B of the HOA Covenant. Section 47B. I didn't even belong to their HOA. They'd attached a fine schedule, $500 a day for non-compliance. My destroyed bridge was apparently still a violation until I paid them to remove the rest. I called the number at the bottom. Linda herself answered. "Mrs. Prescott, there's been some mistake," I said. "My property isn't part of your HOA." "Technically," she replied. "The bridge connected to the common area, which falls under our jurisdiction. Technically," I said. "You're trespassing." She paused, then gave a little chuckle that made my stomach twist. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sure we can resolve this amicably. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." A week later, I walked into my first HOA meeting. The community center smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and a row of faces that looked like they'd never held a shovel. Linda sat at the head of the table with her binder and gavel. Surrounded by her loyal board, I laid out my papers, property deed, survey map, the original construction records from 1923. "This bridge predates your entire development," I said. "You had no legal authority to remove it." Linda glanced at my documents as if they were napkins. "Mr. Morrison, we're simply enforcing community standards." "Community?" I said. "You bulldozed 100 years of history." Her smile tightened. "So raising your voice won't help." I realized then that the vote was already decided. They weren't interested in facts. They wanted compliance. When the motion passed, 5-2 in favor of removal, Linda gave the gavel a sharp tap like a judge delivering a sentence. Walking out, gravel crunching under my boots, I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not just anger, something deeper. The kind of anger that comes when people confuse power with right. Over the next month, the harassment began. 2 security guards parked at the end of my driveway, documenting violations, citations for my grass being too tall, a letter about my dock needing to be repainted per aesthetic guidelines. Someone even complained that my mailbox wasn't the approved shade of black. Sarah tried to stay optimistic. "Maybe it'll blow over," she said one night over dinner. "You've got the law on your side." I smiled at her, but inside I wasn't so sure. The law doesn't always protect the people who play fair. Then came the morning I found tire tracks across my lawn, leading to the water's edge. Someone had dumped construction debris right where the bridge had stood. Broken rebar, chunks of concrete, even old wiring. It felt deliberate, like they were marking territory. That's when I started digging through my grandfather's boxes in the attic. If they wanted a fight, I needed to understand exactly what I was standing on. Literally, among the musty papers, I found maps, handwritten notes, and one brittle document sealed in plastic. Morrison Family Water Easement, 1923. At first it looked like old legal gibberish, but one phrase jumped off the page: secondary flow management rights. I didn't know it yet, but those 4 words were about to change everything. The words secondary flow management rights echoed in my head long after I climbed down from the attic. I set the brittle page on my kitchen table and stared at it like it might start talking. My great-grandfather's signature curled across the bottom beside an embossed county seal almost a century old. Whatever this document meant, it wasn't small. Somewhere inside those legal lines was a key, and maybe a weapon. The engineer in me kicked in. I scanned the papers, made notes, cross-referenced land surveys. By midnight, my table looked like a crime scene. Maps layered with sticky notes, a laptop glowing with county record PDFs, and a coffee mug that had gone cold twice. The deeper I read, the clearer it became. Samuel Morrison hadn't just built a bridge. He'd helped design the entire lake system, including the dam at the northern inlet. His company had maintained operating authority for decades before the county ever created zoning laws. And that clause, secondary flow management rights, granted the Morrison estate legal control over maintenance of auxiliary spillways. In plain English, I could control how much water stayed in the lake. I sat back, heart thumping. Linda thought she'd buried me under HOA fines and gossip. She had no idea I literally held the lake in my hands. The next morning, I called an old friend from college, a water rights lawyer named Patricia Gomez. She picked up on the second ring. "Jake Morrison. Haven't heard that name since A&M. What kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind with paperwork older than both of us," I said. "Can you drive up here this weekend?" By Friday, Patricia was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by the same avalanche of documents. She adjusted her glasses, read in silence for a long time, then finally looked up. Jake, this isn't just a property easement. This is flow management authority. Your family never surrendered it. That means you have federally recognized control of the secondary channels. So I could, theoretically, legally operate maintenance valves, yes, including releasing water. I exhaled, half amazed, half terrified. Patricia leaned forward. But don't even think about using this out of anger. The law is your shield, not your sword. Trust me, I said. I just want them to stop, she smiled. Then we'll make them stop the right way. While Patricia prepared filings to confirm the validity of the easement, I drove to the dam itself. It sat half hidden by trees at the far end of the lake, a century-old wall of concrete that still hummed faintly with the sound of moving water. Rusted stairs led down to a maintenance hatch I hadn't opened since childhood. The smell of moss and machine oil filled the air. Inside, shafts of light cut through dust, illuminating gears, levers, and an enormous brass wheel the size of a steering column, hand-forged. Engraved S. Morrison, 1923. I rested my palm on it and felt the vibration of the water pressing behind the gate. Somewhere in that deep reservoir lay every ounce of leverage I'd need. Back at home, the HOA doubled down. More letters, more fines, even a structural safety inspection notice signed by Linda's husband, Rick Prescott, now posing as a licensed contractor. The report claimed my dock was unsafe, my retaining wall unstable, and my shed a potential environmental hazard. They gave me 10 days to comply or face condemnation. 10 days. I wasn't the only target either. Mrs. Chen, the 80-year-old neighbor who'd voted against Linda, suddenly received citations for non-uniform landscaping. Tom Rodriguez, a maintenance worker at the resort, told me Linda had threatened to cut his hours if he kept associating with certain individuals. The neighborhood was turning into a chessboard, and Linda was moving pieces faster than anyone could react. Sarah tried to keep me grounded. "Promise me you'll stay calm," she said one night, folding laundry while the news hummed in the background. "I don't want to see you get arrested over a bridge." I took her hands. "I'm not going to break the law. I'm going to use it." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then do it smart. Do it like an engineer." That night I drew up a timeline. Verify water rights, expose HOA corruption, and if everything failed, prove exactly what the lake owed the Morrison name. Patricia moved fast. Within a week, she'd filed for confirmation of historic water rights recognition. We also submitted public records requests for all HOA expenditures. What came back looked like a bad accounting thriller. Tens of thousands of dollars paid to Prescott Security Solutions, Rick's company, despite his contractor's license having expired 2 years earlier. Another $10,000 billed to Prescott Construction, a firm that didn't exist in the state registry. "Classic self-dealing," Patricia muttered. "If this goes to court, she's toast." Still, Linda didn't slow down. Flyers appeared on community boards, warning residents about unsafe water conditions near my property. Someone even started a rumor that I planned to sell the land to an industrial developer. It was petty, but it worked. People stopped waving when I drove by. That's when Frank Wilson entered the picture. Frank had been the dam operator for 30 years, a quiet man with oil-stained hands and a habit of chewing toothpicks. He showed up at my dock one afternoon with a thermos of coffee and a grin. "Your granddaddy built that dam right," he said. "Still runs smoother than the new ones." "I'm starting to think he built it smarter than all of us," I said, handing him the easement copy. Frank read it, whistled low. "Well, I'll be." "You know, those secondary valves haven't been used since the drought of '86. Still operational, though." "Operational?" He nodded. "Turn that wheel 3 times clockwise and you'll drop the lake 6 inches an hour. Of course, you'd better warn the marina if you ever do it." I stared across the water at the half-built resort glinting in the sun. Oh, I'd give plenty of notice. By late summer, Patricia had enough evidence to request a formal injunction against further HOA harassment. We mailed the papers to the county clerk and waited. But Linda, sensing momentum slipping, called an emergency board meeting. The agenda, Address ongoing threats to community safety posed by Mr. Morrison. I showed up early, carrying a folder of my own. When the gavel hit, Linda launched into a speech about protecting property values and ensuring uniform aesthetics. Then she pivoted. Unfortunately, Mr. Morrison's aggressive behavior has escalated. We've received multiple complaints that he's tampering with dam equipment. Murmurs filled the room. I stood. That's a lie. I haven't touched the dam. But since you brought it up, maybe we should discuss who's been paying her husband's fake security company with HOA funds. Patricia handed copies of the accounting records down the table. Linda's smile faltered for the first time. That's irrelevant, she snapped. Fraud's never irrelevant, I said. And for the record, the state's already investigating. The room buzzed. People looked at each other, uncertain. For once, I saw doubt in her followers' eyes. Linda slammed the gavel. Meeting adjourned. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed at 2 a.m. It was Tom Rodriguez. Jake, you didn't hear this from me, he whispered, but Linda's hired a demolition crew for tomorrow. Says she's removing what's left of the bridge debris for public safety. Without a permit? Doesn't care. She wants it gone before the injunction hits. By sunrise, I was at the county courthouse filing for an emergency stay. The clerk stamped the order just as the first truck rolled up at the lake. When I delivered the paper to the crew foreman, he shrugged and drove off. Linda watched from her SUV, lips pressed thin as paper. You can stall, Mr. Morrison, she said through the window, but you can't stop progress. I smiled. Progress? Careful, Linda. Around here, progress flows both ways. Over the next week, the pressure built like rising water behind a dam. News of the injunction spread. Some neighbors started asking questions. Others avoided me entirely. Then one afternoon, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived with another notice, an anonymous complaint alleging tampering with critical infrastructure. They had to check. I walked them to the dam, opened the hatch, showed every bolt sealed, every gauge and spec. They thanked me and left, looking embarrassed. But I could almost feel Linda watching from somewhere in the trees. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the dock, moonlight rippling across the water, and thought about my great-grandfather carving those limestone blocks by hand. He'd built something meant to last, not something meant to control people. Maybe it was time I reminded everyone what lasting really meant. The following Monday, Patricia called. The county verified your water rights claim, she said. You're officially listed as Secondary Flow Management Authority. So it's real. It's real. But remember, use it responsibly. I looked out at the glittering resort lights on the far bank. Don't worry, I said softly. I'm all about responsible management. That night I drove to the dam with Frank. The air was still, crickets loud enough to drown thought. Inside the chamber, he handed me a flashlight and pointed to the brass wheel. Clockwise to open, slow and steady. She'll move smooth. I gripped the cold metal, felt its weight, then let go. Not tonight, I said. Not yet, because revenge wasn't the goal anymore. Proof was, and the next move needed to be clean, undeniable, and entirely by the book. Patricia drafted our proposal for the next HOA session. I'd keep the bridge remains as a registered historic landmark. The HOA would cease harassment, and the resort would receive guaranteed minimum water levels through a formal agreement. Everyone would win. I sent the letter personally to Linda's mailbox. 2 days later, she returned it unopened, the envelope stamped refused. That's when I knew negotiation was over. I looked across the lake at her glittering development and whispered, You wanted control, Linda. Let's see how much you can handle. The week after Linda refused my proposal, the whole neighborhood went quiet, too quiet. No more letters, no guards parked by my drive. For a moment, I thought she'd finally realized she was losing. Then Patricia called and shattered that illusion. Blackstone and Associates just filed a motion to dissolve your injunction, she said. $2,000 an hour lawyers. She's going nuclear. Blackstone was infamous for flattening anyone who stood in their client's way. I thanked Patricia, hung up, and stared out at the lake. The surface looked peaceful, but I could feel the pressure underneath. Just like water building behind a dam before the spillway opens. 3 days later, another certified envelope. Arrived an emergency community protection vote. The HOA board was calling a meeting to authorize any and all actions necessary to ensure public safety regarding Mr. Morrison's property. Those words were pure Linda, polite on paper, poisonous underneath. I showed the letter to Sarah. "Looks like they're daring you," she said. "I don't take dares," I answered. "I keep receipts." When I walked into the meeting, the community center buzzed with whispers and the click of news camera shutters. Patricia stood beside me, steady as a metronome. Linda opened with a speech about rogue individuals endangering property values. She called me a menace to progress. When she finally paused for breath, I set my folder on the table. "Everything I've done is legal. The only person manipulating anything here is you." Patricia passed out copies of the bank statements showing HOA money funneled into Linda's family businesses. Faces around the room shifted from suspicion to disgust. Someone in the back muttered, "Is that even legal?" "No," Patricia said. "And the county's already investigating." Linda slammed her gavel. "Enough. This meeting is over." She stormed out, cameras following, her perfect smile cracking under the lights. That night, Tom Rodriguez called. "She offered me 15 grand, he whispered. "Wanted me to fake a report saying you sabotaged the dam." I recorded everything. The sheriff's got it. The next morning, deputies paid Linda a visit, and the resort investors froze her accounts. Most people would have stopped there. Linda didn't know how. 2 days later, the sheriff himself called me. "Mr. Morrison, tomorrow county officials will inspect the dam. Be there if you'd like representation." "Would I like it?" I said. "Sheriff, I'll bring the paperwork." When I arrived, half the town had already gathered, reporters, neighbors, curious onlookers. The sky was washed in pale blue light, the air thick with humidity and tension. Linda stood near the concrete wall, flanked by 2 lawyers in charcoal suits. She pointed straight at me. "That man is dangerous. He intends to drain the lake out of revenge." The sheriff frowned. "Do you have proof?" "My intuition," she snapped. Patricia stepped forward, handing him a folder. "Federal confirmation of Mr. Morrison's secondary flow management rights. He's here to perform scheduled maintenance." The sheriff read the pages carefully, then nodded. "Ma'am, he's within his rights. Please stand back." Linda's voice cracked. "You can't just let him." He raised a hand. "Ma'am." I walked to the maintenance hatch. Every lens in the crowd followed. My hands were steady, as if my great-grandfather himself guided them. The brass wheel gleamed under the morning sun. Across the water the resort glittered. Boats, glass decks, manicured lawns built on arrogance. I placed both hands on the wheel and turned it 3 times clockwise. The dam groaned, deep and resonant. Then the sound of rushing water rolled out like thunder. The bypass channels opened, and the lake began to move. Slow, deliberate, lawful. White foam surged through the spillways, catching light like molten silver. For a minute no one spoke. Then a shout from the marina. "The docks are grounding!" Reporters scrambled closer. Linda froze, staring as the shoreline crept downward, disbelief tightening her features. "You can't do this," she screamed. "Actually," I said, "I can. It's called maintenance." By sunset, the lake had dropped 18 inches. The resort's docks tilted in mud. Its grand opening was cancelled before it began. The bank, honoring the loan clause, called in $4 million. By dawn, the investors had voted Linda out and filed charges for fraud and attempted bribery. When deputies served the papers, she didn't look at me, just drove away, tires spinning gravel into the air. The weeks that followed felt like exhaling after months underwater. The county transferred the resort to new management under Mrs. Chen and Tom. They asked me to consult on shoreline restoration, paid work of all things. Together we cleared debris and rebuilt the bridge as a historical landmark, every limestone block cut to match the originals. When the last stone slid into place, sunlight broke through the clouds, and the crowd on the bank cheered. At the dedication ceremony, Sarah stood beside me holding a photograph of my grandfather fishing there in 1948. Kids ran laughing across the new span while the mayor tied a ribbon around the rail. The bridge looked exactly as it had in the old pictures, only stronger. The investors kept their promise. A portion of resort profits now funds local schools. Patricia and I launched the Morrison Water Rights Scholarship at A&M for students who want to protect community resources. Frank retired for good, leaving me as the lake's official consultant. Most mornings I walk out to the dam with my coffee. The brass wheel sits still under a sheen of dew, silent but alive. I touch the cold metal and feel the faint hum of water pressing against concrete. Steady, balanced, patient. People sometimes ask if I regret what I did. I tell them no. I didn't destroy anything. I restored order. Linda tried to rewrite a century of history with a gavel and a smile. But water doesn't care about ego, it remembers. It remembers the hands that shaped its path and the people who respected its power. When sunlight hits the new bridge just right, I swear I can hear my great-grandfather's voice in the breeze. Build it right, and it'll outlast anyone who forgets why it mattered. They destroyed my bridge. But they forgot my family built the lake.